I hope you feel it. You feel it. For those of you who know me, you know it is my mantra to always speak truth to power, and I've got to share a history story with you, each and every one of you. And it happened to me in my life when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was raised by my grandparents. My grandmother was a domestic worker from Manning, South Carolina. My grandfather, a Navy veteran from Accomack County, Virginia. And the two of them were having a disagreement, and the windows were open in our row house. And I remember being 8, 9 years old, going outside to sit on the steps, and I cried, and a neighbor walked by and said, "Sherelle," nosy neighbor, "why are you crying?" And I said, "Mommy and Daddy are upstairs having a disagreement. They're having an argument, and I don't like it." And my grandmother, y'all, she had the windows open, and she was listening. Somebody said, I know what happened. She called me upstairs. She called me into her room. I walked in, and she gave me a tongue lashing like I have never received before. She said to me, "No matter what goes on in this house, you don't ever go outside telling anybody about what goes on in this house." And the story came back to mind when we were on our way to walk here into Temple University, when I heard someone, they were fast and quick to talk about the fact that our Democratic nominee for President of the United States had made her vice presidential pick that we are all super excited about. Let me hear you say Harris and Walz. But they were looking for something, and I knew what they were looking for. On Today, Democrats, we must take a page out of my grandmother's book, that domestic worker from South Carolina, and remember that our Democratic nominee has spoken, and that's it, period, end of story. How do you know, Sherelle Parker, that others will attempt, because of our intense advocacy within our party, they are going to attempt to use divide and conquer to bring us apart so that we can take our eyes off the prize and the only North Star that should be in all of our hearts, minds, and spirits, and that's making sure that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are the next president and vice president of the United States of America. When I tell you that my spirit is full at this moment, it's beaming with pride and dignity and gratitude. Gratitude for our President, Joe Biden, who's dedicated his life 50-plus years. He's made serving our country his mission. Join with me in giving a huge round of applause to President Biden. I want you to know, this is important to me as mayor of Philadelphia. I'm a high school English teacher by profession who just happens to be the mayor. And one of my favorite authors and thought leaders of all time is a gentleman who just would have been celebrating his 100th birthday named James Baldwin. James Baldwin had a quote that he would often state when he was fighting for social and economic justice. He would say, "I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. I can't believe what you say because I see what you do." Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in America. The promise of this moment and what it means for America couldn't be thicker. You can feel the energy in this room. It is tangible and it is palpable. As Vice President of the United States of America, I had the opportunity to meet Kamala Harris when she had just started out on the trail, and she came to Philadelphia to visit on her first campaign sort of meeting here in Pennsylvania. And when she came to Philadelphia, she had a whole lot of other places that she could have been. But guess where she chose to be? In the neighborhood, with the people, in the backyard, talking to women about the power of unity and addressing issues extremely important to those in our nation. But like James Baldwin, I watch what you do. And I want you to know that as Vice President, she has continued to deliver time and time again for the city of Philadelphia. And I've only been here for 7 months. I just got here. I know my mayors across the nation will appreciate this. I never take a picture with a big check before the little check is in the bank. And in Washington, D.C., they've sent $638 million to Philadelphia for water infrastructure, for mass transit, for environmental remediation. I don't just listen. I also saw our Vice President do something that a whole lot of people had counted out. She and I are Divine Nine Sisters and graduates of historically black colleges and universities. Time and time again, she's made sure that she has delivered. My ask as the mayor of Philadelphia here on today is for you to not let any of the tricksters, because you know Trump the trickster. How many people have seen Trump the trickster? That's right. Don't let Trump the trickster take our eyes off the prize. We have to remember that there is nothing that is more important than electing the Harris-Walz team and sending them where they belong, to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, to the White House. You're in Philly. I don't have to tell you about the power and importance of grit and in hustle. You know, that's what we do. We are a city that is based on the presence of resilience and our strength to overcome obstacles. I want you to know that none of us here today should forget that we are Democrats and that we are for the working class and that we support organized labor. And don't forget this. We know that the middle class built America and organized labor built the middle class. To our vice presidential candidate, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, I am proud, sir, that you are an educator. You know the power of public education has in helping to close the gap between the haves and the have-nots. I want you to know that we paid attention to your work in Minnesota, free college tuition for low-income students, free college tuition for low-income students, free meals for school children, protections for the LGBT community, standing up for workers and union members. I want to say this to you. Are you ready, Philly and Pennsylvania, to rumble for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? When you walk out this door, I want you to put your chucks on and tie them up tight and knock on every door you can to let America know what's at stake. Our citizenship, we must remember, requires that we use the word as both a verb and a noun. And it requires our action. And we have the power in our hands. Let me hear you all say, the power of the people is greater than the people in power. They think they got us. They think they're going to divide and conquer us. They think that we are going to let them throw shade on our Harris and Walz shine. Let me hear you say, don't throw shade on my Harris Walz shine. Don't throw shade on my Harris Walz shine. Today, I'm proud to be here with each of you. When we leave out of here, we've got work to do, and we are going to make sure that Kamala Harris is the 47th President of the United States of America. And that Tim Walz is the Vice President of the United States of America. I saw some folks here. I want you all to put your ones in the air for me. Everybody right now, because this one represents unity. I want you to know that together, we are one city. Let me hear you say one city, one region, one state, and one nation united. Let's go and get to work. Thank you all.
Everyone on the concourse, please take your seats. Everyone on the concourse, please take your seats. Philly, how y'all feeling? How y'all feeling?
Isn't this neat?
Please welcome the United States Senator for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, John Kerry.
Philadelphia! Philadelphia! Hey, look, I'm a Yinzer. I'm a Steeler guy. And I'm a Sheets guy. But today, we are all Team Harris Walz today right now. Pennsylvania picks the president. We did that in 2020. And in 3 months, we're going to do that again. Look, the choice just could not be any more stark than this. You know, this election is about moving our country forward with Vice President Harris and Governor Walz. Or a couple of really weird dudes. And look, I gotta tell you, I work with J.D. Vance. I do. And I'm here to confirm that he is a seriously weird dude. Look, let's get to work, and it all starts now. Thank you, Philadelphia.
Please welcome the United States Senator for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Bob Gates.
Thanks, everybody. Hello, Pennsylvania. All right. The reason I ran around that corner is because we want to get to hear from Kamala Harris in a couple of minutes, but I want you to know something. I want you to know something. I know we didn't practice this, but I have 2 questions for every Pennsylvanian in this audience, even if you're not from Pennsylvania. I got 2 questions. The first question, you ready? Are you ready to win for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? Yeah. And the second question is, are you ready to win for everyone on our ticket? Now, look, I don't have to tell this crowd anything about Kamala Harris's record of public service. You know her. You know her days as a prosecutor putting away dangerous criminals, to her time in the United States Senate and as vice president, fighting for women's rights, voting rights, and workers' rights. You know her service as vice president, as Democrats brought jobs and investment back to our Commonwealth. You also know that Vice President Harris, over and over again, has proven that she's ready to serve as our president and our commander-in-chief on day one. And I am certain that you know the last thing I'm about to say. Not the entire last thing, but what I'm about to say next. You know as well that she is ready to defeat Donald Trump. So, I know.
I am your warrior. I am your justice. I am your retribution.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. I know Donald Trump's type.
The 2024 election is in full swing. For every key campaign moment, The Washington Post is there, bringing you live coverage with insight and analysis. From landmark Supreme Court decisions to the sentencing of Donald Trump. We'll be on location reporting live from the Republican and Democratic national conventions and the presidential and vice presidential debates. It all leads up to our 2024 Election Night Special, providing real-time race calls, live updates from our reporters on the ground, monitoring the pivotal races that will determine the balance of power in Washington and the future of our country. No one covers politics and elections like the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness.
Kamala Harris has her first campaign event tonight with her vice presidential pick, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. They are in Philadelphia for a rally. You can see the live feed right there. There's Senator Bob Casey getting the crowd excited as they greet the Harris-Walz ticket for the first time. Welcome to live coverage from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey. I'm joined in our studio by Rhonda Colvin and James Homan. James, columnist, Rhonda Colvin, senior political correspondent. Thanks to you both. We will go live to Philadelphia as soon as Kamala Harris and her new VP pick take the stage. Now, this campaign has changed so much. Only 16 days ago did Joe Biden say, "I'm no longer running." Kamala Harris has ascended to be the top of her ticket, and just today, she picked Tim Walz. Tell us more about who he is, James.
She's picked an everyman, someone who was enlisted in the Army, not an officer, a geography teacher in southern Minnesota, won a huge upset against a Republican who had just been reelected by 25 points as part of the 2006 Democratic wave, and then gets elected governor in 2018, reelected in 2022, and with a unified Democratic control of the legislature, passes one of the most progressive agendas of any state in the country, and all of a sudden finds himself as the most liberal in terms of record of the 6 finalists for the job. And now just really 18 years after he was a high school teacher, he is poised to potentially be one heartbeat away from the presidency of the United States.
We're keeping an eye on this rally in Philadelphia, and one of those people who were at the top of that short list, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, will be speaking shortly. So we'll go back to Philadelphia when we see Governor Shapiro talk, because we're all curious to see how he handles this moment. The reporting was, Rhonda, that it was really down to Walz and Shapiro at the top of the list. What do we know about how Kamala Harris made this decision?
Well, we know over the weekend she did interview the 6 men who were on that publicly known short list. And as you said, Shapiro and Walz were on the list last night as the last 2 remaining contenders. But when it comes to her thinking, what we are hearing from sources who know her political thinking, is she wanted someone who she could have a connection with, who she could personally get along with, and she felt as if Walz was likable, and that if he's likable to her, he could be likable to the rest of the nation. I also think that this gives us some insight into her own political strategy and perhaps her political savviness, because she did pick someone. She didn't go the Donald Trump route of picking someone who was kind of just a carbon copy of herself or her priorities. She chose someone where she knew he was going to fill some gaps that she has. Of course, a lot of people know her record as a senator, also when she was a politician in California, and that may have been a little bit of an area of vulnerability for her, because she could be painted as a California progressive, too liberal for the rest of the country. But she gets a person, as James said, who is that everyman, the common man, a high school teacher, someone who's in the National Guard. And I was looking at his record as governor earlier today. There are so many parts and tenets of the Democratic agenda that he has been out front and with his own legislature in Minnesota been able to get things done, that he kind of checks boxes across the whole Democratic fold. So he is a very interesting choice from a strategy perspective as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you say he was the most liberal of the top 6 or so who were ultimately really in contention for this spot.
He doesn't present that way. And, I've talked to Harris sources all day. She really liked his biography, the fact that he is this sort of often compared to Chris Farley's characters on Saturday Night Live. She
How
liked
and
that
why?
he won because he's goofy. He's a big ball of energy. He's restless. He feels he's changed his wardrobe a little bit. I've been covering him for more than 15 years, gotten to know him pretty well. He used to wear suits that were too ill-fitting. He kind of, he just was a burly, big guy, and his first term was defined by COVID and George Floyd and the riots in Minneapolis. His second term, because he had this Democratic majority, he was able to push through all these policies. And I'm told that Kamala Harris wants to push through some of those very same policies if she gets the chance to be president. So she found that really appealing, and she just liked him. She liked him.
Our colleague, White House reporter Tyler Pager, is in Philadelphia at Temple University's Leocoris Center. He joins us by phone. Tyler, let's see if you can hear us. What do you expect to hear from Tim Walz tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can't hear Tyler. So Tyler is in the center right now, and I'm only laughing because he is doing like triple duty, right? He's phoning into us, he's covering this rally live, and he's been sending us missives back about what we expect Tim Walz to say. So if we manage to get Tyler, thank you, Tyler. We'll keep trying to work to connect with you. But we do expect to hear a message tonight from Tim Walz that boosts up Kamala Harris, but also gives us a sense about who he is, James.
His values. He's someone who served in the military, had 2 children because of IVF. His dad died of lung cancer when he was only 19 years old, and the medical bills from his dad's final weeks of life forced his mom to go back to work for years to pay down the hospital debt. I think we talked about Chris Farley. One of the things I heard from a Kamala Harris aide was that the staffers were all jokingly comparing him in recent days to Eric Taylor, the coach of Friday Night Lights in the movie, because he was a football coach. He took a team that was winless, got him to win the state championship, and one person said they could really imagine him saying, "Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose." He's this linebacker coach who was also the faculty advisor to the Gay Straight Alliance in rural Minnesota in the 1990s. And so he can sort of give this like pep talk, and he's funny and lighthearted. He's the one who came up with the Republicans are weird branding that has gone so viral. So I think Harris believes that she has found someone who can be a really effective messenger in the blue wall states. Minnesota hasn't voted for a Republican in a presidential election since 1972, although It was pretty close in 2016, but Harris believes that Walz will play well in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those blue wall states.
All right, let's try Tyler Pager again. Tyler, if you can hear us, tell us what you're expecting tonight.
Yes, I can hear you. As I said earlier, it's a little loud in here, but thanks for having me, Libby.
So, Tyler, what is the energy like? I mean, if you can't hear us, it's for a reason, right? Tell us about what the crowd is like and what you're listening for.
Yeah, we're in a basketball arena here, and Senator Bob Casey is currently talking, and the crowd is very excited. Obviously, this is the first time that Vice President Harris and Governor Walz will appear together in this crucial swing state of Pennsylvania. So a lot of excitement here, and the Vice President and the Governor haven't even worked out on.
I think I can fill in the gaps that Tyler was talking about. They haven't appeared before in this moment, and so there's so much interest and curiosity about what they will be like together. What do we know about how Republicans are trying to hit them today, Rhonda?
Well, we've heard from the Trump campaign. They have painted him as a liberal, saying that he is a Golden State wannabe in the Midwest. We've also heard that I believe Donald Trump's words about him in a campaign email was that Walz would be a bring hell on earth. That he was going after.
Very dramatic.
Very dramatic. And it was also a campaign email where they were asking for money as well from their supporters. J.D. Vance was asked about him while he was on the way to a speaking engagement, and he did say that he wants to debate him. He also pointed out, I thought this was interesting, he pointed out specifically Walz's response to the George Floyd protest. I think that might be something we'll hear more about, and I think the Harris campaign is prepared for that. But again, we're hearing from the Trump side what we would think that we would hear from the Trump side. I think it'll be interesting moving forward, seeing how voters feel about that, because by picking someone who can be seen as a likable common man, that does paint a very stark contrast for the Trump campaign to go up against. If they are responding in ways that seem dramatic, as you said, or angry, does that play into Harris's favor?
And I mean, Republicans tried to pick someone in J.D. Vance who they thought could speak to the quote-unquote common man, right, who could represent America, the Rust Belt. But the rollout they haven't had control of the rollout in the way that the Harris campaign hopes to have control of the rollout of Tim Walz.
Yeah, and so, I mean, in both cases, the vast majority of Americans really didn't have any kind of understanding of who these guys were, so it's a race. It's a jump ball. Both parties are trying to define their guy before the other side can.
You have to speak in only football analogies.
Yeah.
No basketball.
No, exactly.
No basketball tonight, James. And so J.D. Vance, really Democrats had an opening, and they were able to define him in some ways by showing his old words, his old comments, and using them against him. And Republicans are trying to do the same thing against Tim Walz. Is it working so far?
You know, I think on the left, it did take 3 days to deploy the National Guard after George Floyd. State spending in Minnesota grew by 40%. Tim Walz did raise taxes. I think among a certain set of voters that is breaking through because they've never heard of this guy and they don't see the jovial side. That's why this introduction tonight is so crucial. It's why the Democratic Convention the week after next is so crucial, because they're going to get to show him in this setting where he's great, you know, with his dog and his 2 kids and being the school teacher, and have his former football players and his former students talking about, you know, Coach Walz, Mr. Walz. And so that, if Democrats can nail that, it's going to really help soften Harris, but it's also going to make it harder to portray him as this, you know, San Francisco wannabe. He didn't even go to San Francisco until pretty late in life. It's kind of amusing to watch them to do that, but there are legitimate things in his record to hit. Walz, like, you know, he's been out there on TV defending Harris. One of the things that he's attacked on is, you know, paid family leave, child tax credits, a lot of spending, affordable housing, and he says, well, I want people to, you know, have food, and, you know, he's very good at making pretty liberal ideas sound very reasonable. He is very kind of Midwestern coded, and he just doesn't come across as the angry liberal that Trump wants to define him as. The debate will also be another opportunity where, you know, they'll both be sort of trying to one-up each other. Interestingly, both Walz and Vance talk about their love for Diet Mountain Dew. So we haven't heard the last of that.
You can see this event at Temple University in Philadelphia. People who are attending have gotten red, white, and blue glowing bracelets. It does have this. They're trying to create this feel of like a real vibe of like a stadium concert. It is so interesting that Democrats are finally able to grab crowds right now. Something that Donald Trump brags about all the time, really is singularly focused on very often, crowd size and things like that. He has seemed rattled, frankly, by the fact that Kamala Harris is now able to get crowds and get people to turn out for her like this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that in the last few weeks with some of his responses, how he spoke about her at the NABJ convention. I think it does show that his campaign may feel like they were thrown a curveball in the switch up with, Biden leaving and Harris coming in. This also might be a little bit of a curveball. A lot of people were thinking Shapiro would be the one, even late as last night. So it does seem as if the Republican Party is going to have to figure out their messaging. I mean, both parties are, but that they are going to figure out where will be the most effective area to hit Walz and connect Harris as well, and go up against someone who is going to be defined, as we keep saying, a common man. And one of the things, I know he kind of coined that phrase weird. Well, he didn't coin it, but he's been using it. The word I've been hearing all day is normal when people have been describing him, whether that's people on the Hill who have been saying he's the one, I'm so glad she picked him, or that's just people who've worked with him before have said he's just so normal. He's going to inject normalcy into this campaign. And, years ago, that might not have been a big thing, but things have been pretty abnormal for this political cycle. And I think, especially the voters I've spoken to, they could probably use some normalcy. So in that way, this could be a very effective pick.
Just think, 16 days ago, Kamala Harris was not even nowhere near the top of the ticket, right? She was solidly running as Joe Biden's vice presidential candidate, running for re-election. And now in just 16 days, they've been able to launch this. She has officially gotten the Democratic nomination because they had this virtual roll call vote that started just last week. So she is the nominee. She's chosen Tim Walz. So we'll see more of this rollout in just, under 2 weeks' time as the Democratic National Convention gets underway in Chicago. We're watching for Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, to take the stage in just a moment, and we want to listen to hear what he has to say and how he addresses this moment. Republicans today have been very critical of Democrats for not having him as their vice presidential pick, and it's been fascinating, James. Top members of the Republican Party have accused Kamala Harris of being swayed by anti-Semitic forces and sort of made it this issue because he is Jewish. Of course, that is not how Kamala Harris made this decision. Why are they pushing so hard to say you made the wrong choice?
Pennsylvania is called the Keystone State, and it is going to be key to this election. It's very hard to imagine Harris winning without Pennsylvania. Shapiro's approval rating is over 60%. On paper, it makes a lot of sense to have someone like Shapiro, and I think that they're trying to create this contrast. There were fears among Republicans that putting Shapiro on the ticket would take Pennsylvania off the map for them. But because it was such a compressed timeline, comfort level mattered hugely. And I'm told that Shapiro's interview with Kamala Harris on Sunday didn't go well. And Harris just really had a great conversation. She really connected and felt very comfortable with Walz. Remember, she's a VP. She's picking someone to have the job that she has. So she understands what makes someone good in that role. She obviously wants someone as loyal to her as she's been to Joe Biden, and Joe Biden was to Barack Obama. And I think that she sort of felt, I'm told, that Shapiro was sort of showboating, and obviously there was some nervousness about a risk you're taking. Is there going to be big blowback from the protesters? Is it going to cost you support in Dearborn, Michigan, if you put someone who's been outspokenly pro-Israel on the ticket?
He's been critical of Netanyahu.
He's been more critical of Netanyahu
it's not a black and white,
than Harris has. And and I think that they would have been okay doing that. She's obviously married to an observant Jewish man, but I think it was a whole host of factors. And now Republicans are saying, oh, like that's why she didn't choose him, and are trying to use that contrast to say she could have picked the more moderate candidate, and she picked the more liberal candidate. That tells us who she is. That tells us what kind of president she would be.
We see a drumline now at the front of the stage, getting the crowd really excited. You just couldn't have events like this 4 years ago after the primary process because of COVID and the pandemic. So this is a new moment, really, for so many Americans to get to be part of, whether it's a Trump rally again or whether it's something like this. We're continuing to watch the stage as things play out. Do you buy Republicans like gloating or saying Harris should have picked Shapiro? Why are they so focused on this?
I think that they know Pennsylvania's the ball game. I think they sort of honestly expected it to be Shapiro. They were prepped for Shapiro, and they didn't think she would actually choose Walz. And so I do think it's sort of surprising to them. Even
it's just interesting not to go after Tim Walz, but to say they made the wrong. It does feel a little bit.
It is a little
like
weird.
a little bit of.
I think they were ready to go after Shapiro, and they'd be saying the opposite. If they'd be saying, "Oh, he's a Obama wannabe," they'd be going after Shapiro in a very different way if he had been the pick.
Our colleague, White House reporter Yasmin Abu Talib, now joins us by phone. And Yasmin, you are not at this wild rally in Philadelphia, so you hopefully be able to hear us. Tell us about what this process was like getting Tim Walz to join the Harris ticket.
Pretty whiplash, unprecedented process in that it all took place over the course of 2 weeks. And this is the vice presidential pick process, I think as we saw with Trump, usually plays out over months, and you've got people sort of jockeying and lots of public scrutiny and various lists of potential contenders. This process started basically in the hours after Kamala Harris became the presumptive Democratic nominee just about 2 weeks ago. Her team says they're very confident they did a thorough vetting process and feel confident in the final decision. But basically, this process was condensed where former Attorney General Eric Holder's firm did the vetting. They ultimately produced a list of 9 candidates who went through the vetting process. They finished that vetting by Thursday. They did, sort of a lightning round of final interviews throughout Friday and the long weekend. And then Harris had made her pick by Monday night and informed Tim Walz this morning.
So, Yasmin, what does Harris see him bringing to the ticket?
I think there were a few things that made Tim Walz stand out above the other 2 finalists, Mark Kelly and Josh Shapiro. One was just her personal chemistry with him, and I think that was ultimately the most important factor. We knew going into the final round of interviews that she held personally on Sunday that she was valuing personal chemistry and someone that she saw as a governing partner, almost to an outside degree, that was very important to her, more so than resume or maybe even what people saw as electoral appeal by the different candidates. And I think she also was very taken by his governing record in Minnesota. Her aides have said that mirrors a lot of what she wants to do on the national level. And also they felt his resume and some other sort of more personal traits like that he's a hunter and a gun owner would make him able to reach into Midwestern states, into rural parts of North Carolina and Georgia and Arizona and other states that they'd like to win, but especially the key battleground states in the Midwest, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that he would be able to talk to those voters and reach them and be accessible. And he also has a communication style that they feel is accessible that not many Democrats have.
Yasmin, this is such a unique situation. There are only 3 months left until Election Day, and while VP choices are often rolled out around this time of year in advance of a convention, there's usually a much longer vetting process that can go on, and a campaign isn't thrown together in just 16 days, as we've seen the Harris campaign have to do. Can you tell us about how they are using resources that were part of the Biden-Harris campaign, how they're doing things new? What's the operation been like?
Well, Harris basically took over Biden's campaign infrastructure. So she retained a lot of his top staff, including Jen O'Malley Dillon, who was his campaign chief. A lot of the same staffers have stayed on and now just transferred to the Harris campaign. And we know with this vice presidential pick, because it was such a lightning fast pick, that they actually prepared materials for all 3 finalists, stump speeches, website graphics, in case her decision went into Tuesday morning, so that they were sort of ready to go for the final announcement today.
All right, Yasmin Abu Talib, thank you so much, White House reporter, joining us by phone. Really appreciate it. Rhonda, there will be such an interesting debate process happen now. Will we see Tim Walz and J.D. Vance debate? J.D. Vance says yes. Tell us about if and how that could happen. Is there a chance that we'll see Kamala Harris and Donald Trump debate? What are you going to be watching for as an opportunity to really compare these candidates?
I think we all are asking these questions for our own schedules as well. You know, we know there was a VP debate on the books. It was taken off the books. It was negotiated also during the time of the RNC when J.D. Vance and Harris did have a phone call, but because no one knew if Harris would be or if Biden would be on that ticket, the Republicans did not want to agree on a debate date. In terms of the presidential debate, that feels like it's in a bit of flux right now because there was a date, I believe it was September 10th, run by ABC News. However, Trump has said he doesn't want to do that. He would rather have Fox. Harris says, no, we're going with what, you all had decided before. So it seems like we're all wondering when, where, and how these debates might occur, which does raise a very interesting question because you do have Republicans and Trump supporters talk about they like how he can answer anyone and he's always ready. But yet, if he can't debate or seems to have problems debating Harris, does that, kind of put a dent in that sort of persona that he's been building? If it looks like he's complaining that he wants it on his terms, what does that do? It's a really interesting dance we're all watching right now. But I'm not sure we have a confirmed date for either the presidential or the VP debate right now.
Let's talk about Tim Walz. And not only has he served as Minnesota's governor, he served in Congress. And there were leaders in Congress like Nancy Pelosi who were eager to see him join the Harris ticket. Tell us about Congressman Tim Walz.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about him as a congressman is he won a district that was a very red district. And in fact, he was the second, James, I believe you probably know the statistic as well, he was the second non-Republican to win that district in Minnesota's history. So he's able to win over folks who may not see eye to eye with him. And he won multiple re-elections as a congressperson. He was on the Agriculture Committee, Veterans Affairs. That's sort of where he did make his mark. He wanted to be sort of this moderate in Congress who cared about and focused on veteran affairs. He also helped negotiate a few of the iterations of the Farm Bill, which is that bill that has to come up every 5 years and be reauthorized by Congress. Right now, we're wondering about the current shape of the Farm Bill. But when he was in Congress, he did help draft that and negotiate it. And that really is a hard-fought piece of legislation when it's negotiated. So that does sort of show some of the strengths he had on the Hill. But I think really one of the most interesting parts of his time on the Hill was the fact that he kept getting reelected. And I think that does show you that he is a popular person within his own people.
James, when he was in Congress, he had a top NRA rating.
He went from an A+ rating to an F rating. Yeah.
So how did he evolve as a member of Congress?
So what happened was, he beats this guy unexpectedly. The DCCC wouldn't even return his calls. The first time he heard from Rahm Emanuel, he told me, was October 15th, 2006, when he sent an internal poll to D.C. saying, look, I'm in striking distance against this guy, Gil Gutnicht.
That's just weeks before the election.
Weeks before the election. No one thought he could win. And so he wins. He ends up getting reelected, 4 or 6 points. But then in 2016, Hillary Clinton loses his district badly, and he only wins by 1 point. So that's why he decides, gosh, my odds of winning statewide might actually be better than winning in this reddening congressional district. That's what prompts him to run for governor, and then to win in a crowded Democratic primary, he takes a bunch of liberal positions and then had a Democratic legislature and was willing to sign whatever they sent him.
We'll talk more about his track record as a legislator and lawmaker in a moment. We can see there Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro on the stage getting a very warm welcome from the Pennsylvania crowd. A reminder that they are at Temple University in Philadelphia, and we know that Shapiro was one of the top two. He was said to be the top two finalist here for